Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Tuesday, May 17th, and the time is 2:07 p.m. At this time, we will begin the briefing agenda with a code of conduct, and welcome Dr. Bohatch and Mr.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Atkins, Mr. Martin. Rob and I are here to provide you with updates on new legislation that needs to be included in the Code of Conduct for next year. Okay, so with that said, we're going to go ahead and begin. Rob?
Good afternoon, board. First of all, the first 5 slides today, just want to make it abundantly clear that the Florida legislature passed legislation this last legislative session that mandates that certain items be in the Code of Conduct. They've always required us for certain things, but there's quite a few this year. So the first is the Pledge of Allegiance. The House Bill 7029, which you're all familiar with, which was the huge education bill, had language towards the back of the bill that mandates that language regarding the Pledge of Allegiance and the ability to opt out be included in the Code of Conduct. In the past, the statute required it to be posted in schools. They have removed that, and it is now required to be in the Code of Conduct. The additional language, which is the final sentence of the slide about putting one's or not putting one's hand over their heart, it shouldn't say chest, that will be changed, and not standing is also added by the legislature to the statute. So this is now mandated and required to be in the Code of Conduct, and that's all we're doing is complying with the law. The second slide, similarly, House Bill 7029, parents can now request a transfer of their child if the student is in a classroom where a teacher is teaching out of field. Those of you all on this board that have been involved in education know that term of art, out of field, meaning that a teacher is teaching in a non-certificated area. And in this new legislation, a parent can opt out of a classroom that's being taught by an out-of-field teacher, and the legislature has now required us to include this language with the process in it regarding 2 weeks that the principal has to determine and notify the parent whether or not they are denying that request. The other point that I'd like to make is that an in-field teacher must be employed by that school in the student's course or grade level, and the transfer must not violate the maximum class size for the parents to take advantage of this provision. Additionally, the legislature in 7029 has required us to put language in the Code of Conduct, and it actually created a new statutory section, 1003.3101, which now permits a parent to request that his or her child be transferred to another classroom teacher in a school. The key here is the parent does not have the right to choose a specific classroom teacher. Those of you that have been in education for a long time know that parents commonly request this, and we accommodate them as best we can. And the legislature saw fit to now include this in the law, and we have to include it in the Code of Conduct. The next slide, the legislature has added to the bullying statute that we include in the Code of Conduct and in our bullying policy, which we'll be bringing to you in the next couple of meetings. We include the programs that are authorized by the school district to instruct students, parents, teachers, school administrators, counseling staff, and volunteers in bullying identification and prevention. What you see on this slide and what will be in the Code of Conduct are the 6 programs that our school district uses for the purposes of providing bullying education. Finally, the legislative requirements, athletics eligibility, this language, which is somewhat extensive, now is required to be included in the Code of Conduct regarding participation in interscholastic athletics and eligibility. The keys here is that a student may not participate in a sport if he or she participated in the same sport in the same school year at another school, unless one of the following exceptions apply, and they're delineated there: active duty military, foster care, court order changes where the student lives. So we now have to allow a student that starts, for instance, playing football at one school, one of those things happens during the season, and they transfer to another school, we would have to allow them to continue to participate in football at the new school, or any other sport. This language is also required now to be included in the Code of Conduct, and that's what we're doing through House Bill 7029. Finally, the student dress code, which we had a conversation about, or you all did with Dr. Bohatch last briefing. We have, at the board's advisement, included, and Mr. Martin's counsel, that if a student dress code violation involving one of those items occurs, if in the principal's judgment it may cause a substantial disruption to the school environment, the student can be disciplined or asked to remove that item. So that's the language, if in the principal's judgment and so on, was added following the discussion at last meeting. Do any of you all have any questions?
Board members?
Can we ask questions generally about the code of conduct now?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Page 57, under level 2 behaviors, level 2, and that says plan 2, the last one is temporary loss of bus privileges. Why would we take away bus privileges when we want kids in school?
Behavior.
Well, it's a good question. Oftentimes, students commit offenses on the bus and to support the bus driver. And trust me, we get this a lot. And when I counsel, especially elementary folks, the first question I ask is, does a child have a way to get to school?
Okay.
And if the answer is yes, then we'll give them inconvenience the parents for a few days. If the answer is no, the kid's on the bus with some safeguards, assigned seat. We look for other options there, but that does come up a lot.
Okay. Another comment, I didn't pick this up before when you brought it before us, but I do want to say kudos, and that is that you've got consulting with law enforcement now in the code of conduct on some of these offenses and actions. So I hadn't noticed that before, and I just wanted to compliment you on that. And then page 65, there's no 42. That's
There's
no,
Okay.
Okay,
you got that?
Yeah, I got it.
somebody will get it.
Okay.
We got it.
All right, just my comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. LaRiviere?
And this is not a question. It's just been in all the years that I taught, if we had a district policy, or I assumed it was, because it was elementary policy, that most of the time, if the parents did not want the child to participate, typically they would write a note or there would be a phone call, and it was just easily handled. And I've never found it to be a problem.
Thank you.
We're good?
Thank you. Yes, do you want to proceed? Yep.
Okay.
No more questions?
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
At this time, we have Mrs. Patty Elkin and Ms. Lori Brooks regarding policy 4.07, participation in private school, home education, charter school, and Lee County extracurricular activities and sports. Welcome.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you. Today we're here to bring forth a policy 4.07. This is the first time you're seeing this, so this is a pre-briefing, which is the opportunity if you have any changes or additional input you'd like to give. This is a great time to do that. Lori Brooks is going to present this to you, but I just wanted to share that this was a collaborative effort of numerous folks, including and not limited to Al Schilling with Virtual School, Meredith Berry, who represented the home school, Dr. Bohatch, who is just up here, Ms. Soretta Ralph from Teaching and Learning, Dr. McCullers from Charter Schools, and Layla Mufti from School Choice. So all of those folks got together and looked at this policy, and these are the recommended changes from them.
Thank you, Ms. Elkin. Board Policy 4.07 has been updated to reflect current statute and to ensure that our language more accurately aligns with current statute, and also to bring the district into alignment with newly passed legislation as a result of House Bill 7029. So the policy more clearly defines opportunities for students to participate in interscholastic extracurricular activities and sports based on whether they are a homeschool student, also private school, charter school, and full-time public virtual school students. So the title of the policy is indicative of all the groups that it covers. The updates to this policy will further assist parents and students and school administrators as well in clear identification of opportunities for student participation in the district's extracurricular activities and sports. So it will improve communication and also clearly delineate when students approach the district what they are able to take advantage of that we provide. Up on your screens and on the projector is a reference guide that was developed to assist school-based personnel from principals all the way through school counselors. It will also be used at student assignment as it took board policy and it put it into a chart for hybrid students, so we can clearly look up the student by what program they are currently involved in and provide them clear and accurate guidance as far as the opportunities available in the district.
Great.
Questions?
Board members?
I have none.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Mr. Martin also participated in the review of this policy, as he does with all policies. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
You.
As Dr. Pruitt gets ready to present the administrative salary schedule, I just want to say a couple words or a couple things before she gets started. Part of this salary schedule is to get in place the principal lead position, and I think the principal lead position is something that for us is imperative to bring consistency in practice across the district. So that's a part of this discussion. The second piece is that she is also going to be presenting information related to the reorganization in that, not the whole, with the org charts and things like that, but in preparation for that move, she's going to be talking about some of the job descriptions that will be, or at least the titles that will be proposed later on. And then the last piece is the way that we would like to bring people into the salary schedule, how we're evaluating their experience and also their expertise, hoping to bring a little bit more of a market-based, objective approach than what we've had in the past. So having said that, I'll turn it back over to the chair and Dr. Pruitt.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Okay, and Dr. Pruitt, you want to go ahead and proceed?
Yes, good afternoon, Dr. Atkins, board members. In an effort to continue towards our strategic plan goal focus area for hiring and retaining highly qualified staff, one of the things that we are looking to do moving into next year is to create a principal lead supplement position. And this position would, again, it would be a supplemental position, so we would take existing high-quality principals, and they would take on additional responsibility in which they would be responsible for approximately 6 schools, and they would be that coach or mentor for those schools. And the idea behind that is really to get information and initiatives right down to the very, basic level, the school level. So the concept being that information and initiatives that are discussed at the cabinet executive level would then be brought down to those
lead principals who then would in turn work with their 6 principals and would drive those initiatives, into the school level. So what you have is a copy of that job description that basically spells out those responsibilities. And really, what's exciting about this particular position is that it really allows that job embedded, professional development to really help our principals to be successful. And so this was a concept that Dr. Atkins, actually I heard him share many years ago about the value of having principals coaching other principals. And so this is kind of bringing that concept to a reality. So you see that outlined in the job description that is presented. And then in this administrative salary schedule itself, you will see that it is outlined there. And basically the eligible principal would receive a $6,000 supplement and paid $3,000 and then another $3,000 in the completion of the duties. And so again, we're very excited about the idea and the concept of that. Before I go on to the other areas, are there any questions about the principal lead supplemental position?
Mrs. Morgan?
2 questions. The first is, how are we evaluating? I liked the description, and it's very specific, so it ought to be fairly easy to evaluate the person, but how are we evaluating the person? And secondly, do the people who are being mentored get to evaluate their mentor so that we know that what we're spending our money on is being well spent from everybody's point of view?
I know one of the things that, and we will have to bring this through the Administrator Evaluation Committee, is how we do that work. And so once the position is approved and we're able to begin to continue that work, we will enhance the current evaluation system that we have to add some components that would be for those specific lead principals. In addition to that, I know that Dr. Atkins is made it very clear that he is looking to initiate some form of 360 evaluation. And so I'm confident that we will find a way to get that feedback so that we can make it part of that process.
Thank you.
Just something I'd like to add in terms of how this position I believe is going to work. One of the things that we're going to do, the lead principal position is going to work closely with school development, which will work closely with myself and also with the division leaders, so that if Dr. Pruitt, for example, has HR compliance issues, that she can work through school development, through these principal leads, to make sure that those issues occur. Contract management issues often come up, and that's another area where we think this will be beneficial. But also over in teaching and learning, we're really thinking about being able to coordinate these lead positions with PD&L specialists, which are going to be deployed in buildings to help with embedded teacher professional development. And not that they would be reporting directly to these leads, but that the principal leads and the PD&L specialists deployed in buildings to help provide that could actually work together in a unified fashion. So that is, again, where you're putting additional resources out into buildings, and I think helping more people drive consistent best practices throughout the organization.
Great, thank you.
But I guess, how will we know it's working?
Good question. I think, first of all, when it comes to the evaluation process, I think that when she talks about adding to the evaluation, that's something that we will certainly do. I think that part of that has to be feedback that we get from our principals in terms of how well it is working. And so one of the things moving forward is that we would ask that HR design a process for allow the field principals to say, is this something that is of value to us? So I think that will give us feedback. And then ultimately, I believe you should see a reduction in some of the issues that have come to to you all as a board and also to us in terms of employee concerns, teachers that come to you concerned about inconsistencies. I think that the union will see similar type of results as well.
The philosophy behind it is the idea that the teacher being the most important thing relative to student success, and that the principal is the most important thing to teacher success, that we expect, based on the research behind the concept, that we will see those differences that Dr. Atkins is talking about. We are tracking, as we've talked about in human resources, we're tracking types of data that we've never tracked before. And that would be through the exit interviews, the stay interviews. We are actually tracking now employee concerns as they come out of schools, and if there's themes to those concerns. We're really strongly looking at the data of people leaving schools, so we're going to collect that information. If previously it was just if they left the district, and now we're going to be looking at if there's a lot of movement from one school to other schools and those types of things. So I believe that we'll be able to see some success based on those indicators as well.
So for example, and she mentioned this, but just to get more specific, as we looked at the balanced scorecard, and one of the things that we're looking at with the balanced scorecard is teacher turnover data by school. And so one of the expectations is that you have to have acceptable turnover data at your particular school, and these principal lead positions, I think if they're being successful, are actually helping to reduce the amount of teacher turnover in those particular schools in a couple different fronts. One is to encourage best practices as it relates to retention, and I can go over what those are at another forum. But they can certainly do that and train their teachers, because great principals have that figured out. Not so great ones do not have it figured out. Secondly, we see a real opportunity for PD&L specialists and principal leads to help us with supporting new teachers in the field in many, many different ways. Including helping them with the certification requirements, helping them get the help that they need, helping them to integrate into PLCs better, helping them get to the resources that they need that we don't necessarily have the ability to do at this point. So a lot of metrics, I think this can push on a lot of different metrics that we are measuring.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Mrs. Dozier.
Yes, one of the questions that I forgot to ask when you and I had a conversation around this, how many lead principals are you looking at hiring?
12.
Thank you. I thought that's what the number was. I couldn't remember.
Okay, so you're talking about 12?
6 at elementary and 6 at secondary.
Isn't that kind of disproportionate? I mean, considering as many elementary schools as we have?
That was the recommendation from school development, that would cover that number. Because if you take those 12 out, because they're the leads, so they're not in that count.
Yeah, but for instance, you're not going to have an elementary principal leading a secondary principal, and you're not going to have a principal at a high school mentoring or leading an elementary.
No, it's right. It will be level to level.
Okay, then that really only takes 6 out of the mix of elementary schools. So, you've still got a little disparity there, because you've got, I think it's, how many, 40-something elementary schools
It works out. 6 times
I'm
6.
not sure of the exact number.
You take 42 minus 6 is 36.
School development, you want to help me out?
6 schools. Right?
53, including K-8s.
Say that again?
53, including K-8s.
Oh, including K-8s.
The K-8s are part of the secondary, then that would.
Well, that's another conversation, I think, because
Okay.
I think it would be difficult for a elementary school to mentor a K-8 principal possibly, because that's a whole different bag of tricks with the
Agreed.
6 through 8. And I mean, they've got a lot more requirements and things that they have to do that the elementary doesn't do, and the elementary has to have things that the middle school doesn't have. So I think that has to be looked at. And I guess my other question, Dr. Atkins, is, and I know we've been talking about your organizational structure. Are you still going to have a person at every level that is like the secondary operations, middle operations, and elementary operations like we have now?
No, we only have two. I think.
Right. We've got two positions, which will be executive director, elementary operations, and executive director, secondary operations. So you've got two positions, whereas
Somehow I thought we had 3. I thought we had, and I mean, I'm thinking of people. We had Jeff, we had
Well-
Jean Ann, and then we had,
yes, you had 3 executive directors, and then you had Martha Hayes, so that's 4 people. And moving into next year, you would have 2 people.
okay, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do, like, look at the numbers and look at, I guess, also look at what is the, I guess, money to money, what are we looking at here?
Money to money, it represents a significant savings. I think it's less than half. And I don't know if you have that, Dr. Pruitt, but if you think about the salaries of 2 positions versus the cost of the lead principal positions, it's roughly half, as I recall.
It might be even more savings than that when you talk about the benefits and all of that. The total package, you're going to save probably a executive position and a half, I would think, roughly.
Thank you. Mr. Toiber.
Well, and the reason why I talked about the numbers is, we have 44 elementary schools, we have 16 middle schools, and even with the 5 K-8s, which would still would be 21 versus 44, as far as the number, and that was the same thing with the executive directors. To have even an executive director handle the middle schools and even include the high schools, it's still not, I think, as problematic or as extensive as having 44 elementary schools under your auspice and control. So,
Well, it would be 44 elementary schools, take out the 6 lead principals, so then you're down to 38. Divide those out, it's approximately 6 per lead principal.
okay, but then the same thing if you take the 16 middle schools and you take away 6,
Right.
and you've got then it's a 2-for-1 ratio.
Well, but you have the special centers, and you have the technical colleges, and you have, there's more than just
You're
the,
going to put those into that group.
I don't have the exact, school development developed the actual list and how they were breaking that down. And I think part of that is still under development based on, because you don't know who those lead principals might be, so you kind of have to, it's kind of a puzzle. You'll have to kind of figure it out based on who is interested in being a lead principal and what level those folks are at, because you certainly don't want to have somebody in that position that is, not experienced and ready to take on that coaching and mentoring role.
Right. And I guess my point, Dr. Atkins, is, and Dr. Pruitt, is I don't want the numbers to fit just because the numbers look like that's the number we, because we just want 6 and 6. If it has to be unbalanced, whatever we
Right.
need, that's the number that we need. I mean,
Yes.
let's not. I don't want to set this up for failure. Is my point. If we're going to pick a ratio of how many schools a lead principal is going to have, we need to have that in mind as far as what type of load they're going to have, because then we can evaluate because everybody's sharing that same expectation and duty level.
Okay.
And I know school development, that was sort of the draft to bring the concept forward. And I certainly, it's, in this salary schedule, it's not limited to 12. So I think that's good advice that you're giving us in terms of when we move forward with looking at the structure.
Good, thank you.
I do know that, one of the things we were kind of shooting for in terms of span of control, if you remember, one of the things that I remember General Dozier got on Dr. Harder about was Dr. Harder's span of control being way too wide and not being able to really, like the issue that we're dealing with right now, being able to drive things down with fidelity. His recommendation to Dr. Harder was 5. I've always remembered that number, and I've read it in other places as well in the literature. So 6 is kind of our sweet spot.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Mrs. LaRiviere?
Oh, I was just saying, when you add all of the high schools with the middle schools, it all starts to adjust. Plus, we have to look beyond the fact of the number of schools as much as we do the workload of each school and what's encountered at each school. So there may be some lead principals that in elementary may say have only 5 schools that they're working with. And maybe another elementary that has 6 or maybe 7, but maybe those 5 schools need more assistance. And so
Well-
that's where we just have to trust you to come up with the right combination to fit the personalities and what the needs are.
And certainly not only the type of school, but the principals involved, and are they brand-new principals, are they experienced principals? And, I think that's going to be a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed right off the bat when I was over the East Zone is that not all schools are created equal, and you certainly have to devote your time more to some schools than others. There were some schools I remember, Veterans Park. I hardly ever had to go out to Veterans Park, but when it came to James Stevens, I had to go out there quite often. So
Exactly. It's just based on what the needs are. My other question that comes to my mind is, do you believe 12 is enough to meet the needs?
Well, again, that was the draft proposal. I certainly think that as we exactly know who's sitting in what seats and who is, interested in taking on that position, I think it's definitely a conversation that we can have.
Okay, thank you.
So then, are you anticipating that the lead principal will be mentoring all of the other principals, or are there perhaps some principals who won't really need that assistance because they're successful with their retention, they're successful with their academic success, and, they're ticking along?
I
So-
think that the time spent could vary. I
Right.
would say you would still want to have that assignment because the goal is to make sure that communication drills all the way down to the, to the nuts and bolts and the boots on the ground. But I certainly would agree that the time that a lead principal will spend with a first-year principal is going to be very different than a veteran principal.
And I would just share that as a principal, and really any position, I do think coaching and feedback is important. Even if you have somebody that's truly at the top of their game, they can always improve. You may see things or not see things that others may see, and so that is our hope, that we even improve our very best.
So then that would include an opportunity for people to share best practices.
Absolutely. That is definitely one of the goals.
Right. I can tell you, and I just to brag on Dr. Pruitt for a minute. I was a middle school principal at what I felt was a highly effective school, and later on, was Dr. Pruitt's supervisor when I was over middle schools, and I think that even that opportunity to be the middle school person gave me an opportunity to actually work with her, and there were things that if I were still a principal, could have picked up off of studying the systems that were in place at Trafalgar Middle School, that I could have gone right back and put into practice at Paul Laurence Dunbar Middle. So same if I had the similar opportunity with any of the others. Principals at the time, I think it's a good thing. So even if you're the lead principal, the point is you can probably learn something from even mentoring those that you're leading.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Board members, any other questions at this point?
So I'll move on to some of the other highlights of the proposed administrative salary schedule. Some of the changes you're going to see are just to align with what we're doing. For example, the increased board contribution to the insurance, the payment in arrears, and some of those items that are just consistent with what we're doing currently. And then one of the other recommendations that we're making and changes we want to make has to do with what we're going to call executive salary schedule. And so there's a couple pieces to that. And one is you will see in there is proposed going back to the chief job titles, of which job descriptions for most of those currently exist, but would definitely want to come to you with some tweaked and enhanced job descriptions. But this has come out of what we have experienced over the last 18 months relative to looking for folks to take on some of those non-traditional roles in the education system, and our ability to attract a wide range of candidates for those positions. And so what the industry standard is showing is that if you have the chief title on some of those job descriptions, it attracts a broader range of folks to the position. So that is the reason for that recommendation. And then in addition to that, one of the things that we were struggling with and do struggle with is that, you know, in education we're very lockstep with pay and grade. And so it sort of ties our hands in areas that we may need to have some flexibility relative to a candidate's experiences, relative to the position itself, and if it's a high-need position. And so our recommendation is to move to a hiring matrix that will allow us to be more competitive and to align those executive jobs with what the industry standards are. And so what you see there is in the jobs that are pay grades 16 through 20, and that would be executive director on up, that a matrix would be used that would look at all types of various components, and from that the matrix would develop where that individual would fall on the salary schedule. And what we expect from this is, again, to be able to A, attract more candidates from which to have a selection, and then B, to be able to be more competitive when necessary with the salary schedule. And that is really based on the past 12 months doing research about salaries and about positions. Again, yes, specific to education, but then also just in the industry at large. You know, one of the things that we're really looking at is utilizing a chief technology officer that will allow us to kind of keep everything together as it relates to IT, IS, ERP, and for that type of position, you want to be able to attract candidates that may not be educators. In other words, that their experience may be in a different industry. And so that might be an area that we would want to be able to look at all of the various criteria to see where that person might fall on the salary schedule. So those are the highlights relative to our proposal for the administrative salary schedule.
Great. Board members, questions? Mrs. Dozier?
All right, as I sit here and I look at this, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I appreciate the fact that you're showing us when these have been revised, the job descriptions and so forth. And some of these positions, I guess I don't understand, and I need some clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
For instance, we've got a teaching and learning assistant superintendent. And then down here, we have a chief academic officer. And I guess I'm reflecting on the old school where we didn't have the assistant superintendents, we only had the chief academic officers. That was the position instead of a assistant superintendent.
And let me just pause right there. The reason they're both still listed is because we would be in transition. Because we were so behind you know, how we are negotiating this year, we're sort of bridging the year we're currently in, which still has assistant superintendents, and then proposal for FY17 is to transition to the chief positions.
So what you're telling me is the assistant superintendents you're going to do away with?
They will transition to the chief positions.
So there will not be a assistant superintendent of business and finance, but instead there will be a chief business officer.
Correct.
And then you will not have a chief of operations, but you will, a assistant superintendent of operations. You'll have a chief operations officer.
Correct.
And, I understand.
So probably what we would do, maybe this will help, once we make the transition, I know that, you like to have things clean. Once we make the transition, what we would do is come back and eliminate redundant positions so that you only have one position there. So for example, the assistant superintendent business and finance would transition to chief business officer, and then we would take off the assistant superintendent. My hope here is we're trying to flatten the organizational structure somewhat, and also give us a little bit additional flexibility to be able to adjust compensation to meet market value and need.
Okay. And I've had this conversation before with other superintendents, and you've probably been here and heard it. To make it clean and seamless, what we need to do then is, as we are revising these job descriptions, because that's the authority and the governance that we have as a board, then as the transition takes place, it has to happen at one time. You need to bring us the job descriptions of those that you're eliminating at the same time that you are transitioning with the new job descriptions, because that's the way we have the authority there.
Okay.
Through our governance is, and if we keep them all on the books, then we can put all those positions in place. And to keep it clean, that's the way we need to do it.
Okay, I understand. And that was our intent, but I think what we can do is, when we bring you the job descriptions, we'll also bring you the deleted job descriptions as well.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Our point today, really, the big thing is to try to conceptually get your approval for the direction we're headed.
Well, you certainly have mine. I've been arguing for this for a while, so I'm glad to see it coming to fruition. And thank you for all the work you've done on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Another comment. Mrs. Dozier.
And I do have another comment, and the comment is, you and I have talked repeatedly about your organizational structure. And, as I said, you came in the middle of the year, there was a structure already in place, and, any CEO has to have a structure that they are comfortable with, that they feel as though works for them, and, vice versa. So basically, this is a snapshot of what you feel is comfortable for you, that you're going to be able to make us a high-performing district by these changes that you have actually put in place.
Yes.
And I certainly, wholeheartedly will support this, because I know I've been kind of on you to get positions in place that you're comfortable with, and because it's important that you have that to be a successful CEO. That being said, some of these, as I looked at this, some of these positions, really, and this is the only time that we have to say these things, some of these positions are really, I know how let me back up for just a second. We are going through our policies, and we do that every 4 years. We just go through all the policies, and we make any changes that we need to make. And every year we go through to add any additions that we have to as a result of the legislature. One of the things that we have not done as a quality organization, we have not constantly reviewed the job descriptions. I think now is a time for us to have those conversations. We have a position here that I see that has not been reviewed since 2009. There are some positions that I see that are even older than that, but I'm starting on the first page with the very first one. I think that that's one of the things that we also need to do as a district. We need to look at those and we need to see if, I'm not saying that you'll eliminate them, I'm not saying that you'll overhaul it and make a totally new one. But, excuse me, we need to have it in a cycle of rotation that we look at them. And I think now is the time that we need to have that conversation so that we can certainly look at these and say that they were all reviewed at such a time. Because you are demonstrating continuous improvement when you do that. So I would like, if that meets the needs of everybody, I would like to see us do that.
Okay. And I know that Dr. Pruitt does have a plan in place to do an ongoing review of job descriptions. We can certainly bring that forward. It's a phased approach. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that, but I think that gets to the question.
That's what was coming to my mind. If I remember correctly, a few months ago, you brought forward, along with Ms. Christensen, the fact that you were going through the job descriptions and weeding out the ones that were no longer used, and then
Yes,
making
we presented
changes.
our 3 to 5 year plan. So far, we have started with the areas that we feel are the highest need. Those are the IT and IS positions. And now we're currently working on the maintenance job descriptions because some of those are really competitive and we're, as the economy gets better, those are more and more difficult to get filled. So, but we're happy to bring back that plan and share where we are and how long it'll take us, because it will. Ms. Dozier's right. I mean, there's a lot of them that we haven't gotten to. So it's a big project. Anything else?
Board members?
I just want to say I'm glad you're doing this. I appreciate the work that y'all have put into this, and I look forward for us seeing your structure in place.
Okay. Thank you very much. And appreciate Dr. Pruitt and her team for the work that they've done in putting this together.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt. And moving right along, Soretta Ralph and Dr. Richard Itzen will talk to us about the balanced scorecard. Good afternoon.
And as they're getting ready, just some things that I just want to talk about as it relates to the balanced scorecard. I think that this is this is work that is ongoing. In fact, Soretta and I were having conversations even today, and there's even some things that I've asked for that I know they're working on trying to get for us as it relates to the graduation cohorts and so forth. And part of this work is about really evaluating our schools, I think, more effectively in terms of being able to look at a number of different metrics and do it in a way that's more fair and equitable than the state grading system is, that simply looks at proficiency, gives us a grade, but it doesn't really tell the whole picture about what's going on behind the scenes. The second thing is we really feel that this work is going to drive our strategic plan and some of the revisions that we're continuing to suggest to the district steering committee for our strategic plan. So you'll see some of that in here today. But again, it's still a work in progress. For example, one of the things that came out of the district steering committee for the strategic plan is a real desire to transition from state data to a more local controlled data, and so we're in the process of doing that. So this represents transitional work, but it also, I think it represents really good work in that it really does drill down and measure schools with a lot more detail than what's ever been done in the past. So having said that, I'll turn it over to Soretta and Richard to take you through the presentation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, board members. Dr. Atkins. First, I want to apologize for providing you the PowerPoint You had one, I believe, on Friday, and you got an updated one probably about 2 or 3 hours ago. So I want to apologize for that. It was our fault because we were adding things to it. Dr. Adkins asked for some things. He asked for additional things over the weekend, and we were trying very hard to accommodate all of his wishes and to provide you the most accurate information. So I do want to apologize for that because I know that was not enough time for you to have adequate review. But it is a draft of what we're presenting today. So as we go through it, we do ask for your feedback and input because we are working through this. We talked a lot yesterday, Richard and I did, about what we even call this presentation. It started out being the balanced scorecard, and then it just evolved. It became strategic plan, it became graduation rate. We just kept growing with it. But we're going to continue calling it the balanced scorecard. But with that, we want to talk about our strategic plan. Our strategic plan, of course, has 7 focus areas, and they drive the work of the district. They drive the work of the schools, and they're what we're about. Each of our focus areas is made up of goals, and when I presented probably a month, maybe 2 months ago on Focus Area 1, it became apparent then that we needed to revise the goals for Focus Area 1. And Dr. Adkins gave us the direction at that time, and the board members, you guys spoke up and said, please do that. Look at what's important for our schools because we want an accurate picture of what we want in our schools, and we want goals that are stretch goals that we want our schools to try to achieve and push towards. So I think when you look at this, and I think maybe Mrs. Morgan, you were at the steering committee meeting when we presented this. You're even going to see some changes from the steering committee, some different goals that we've added some drafts to. When we look at the different strategic planning focus areas, you see the 7 areas, and these are living, breathing documents. Dr. Pruitt was also at the steering committee in April when we presented, and she talked about some areas in focus area 4 that she will be coming forward with, and all of the other leaders for the different focus areas. But we're going to start with focus area 1 today for different draft goals. As Dr. Adkins said, we have provided input to the steering committee for the strategic plan. We've also presented, Dr. Carlin presented to CSI, I believe, last week. DAC will be getting a copy of these tomorrow night. We've also emailed them for feedback to all of our administrators. So we want input from all of our different individuals. As we get closer to finalizing them, then we want them to be put out there for the community to get feedback on our goals. So let's dig in to see what Focus Area 1 looks like. First, as Dr. Adkins mentioned, we want to look at some state data. We have 3 areas of state data that we want to look at. The first one being the district will increase the state ranking as measured by the state grading system. And then the other 2 areas, the district will increase the English language arts achievement by 4 percentage points each year based on the FSA, and the district will increase the math achievement by 4 percentage points each year based on the FSA. When we look at these areas, we look at our state rankings. We can see by our state rankings that over time, the district has ranked at different areas, but we've had different assessments. I think we've changed assessments or different ways of grading our schools in our district. Is it 50 or 60 some different ways of grading over the past several years? So that continues to change. We are right now ranked 26th in the state out of 67 school districts. So with that being said, we want to be aggressive in how we're going to look at our district. So when we think about that, our district will increase our state ranking as measured by the state grading system by yearly targets. Our first year, our district will increase our state ranking from 26th to 22nd. Our next second year, our district will increase our state ranking from 22nd to 16th. Third year, our district will increase our state ranking from 16th to 10th.
So just a couple comments about that. One is that, as Soretta pointed out, the state has changed its system actually, I think it's over 60 times. And so it's very, very difficult to just take some of these other single metrics or the grade even and say, you know, we want to maintain a grade. I don't think that there have been years that making an A has been not that difficult to do, and other years that it was very difficult to achieve an A. But rather than shooting for that grade, we want to be the best district in the state, in the nation, and the first thing we're going to target is to be the best in the state. So we've not been in the top 10 really since the grading system went into place. So we do believe it's an aggressive goal to try to get ourselves within the top 10 of the state in the next 3 years. But I do think it's a goal, you know, worth shooting for. So that's why we have it.
When you're looking at the 9 characteristics of high-performing schools, I was actually at the Florida Organization of Instructional Leaders conference last week, and talked a lot about this document. And it was talking a lot about high standards. It was talking a lot and thinking about the strategic plan. It was talking about high levels of collaboration, communication, commitment. If you don't have that expectation of high standards, if you don't put it out there that you are going to expect that, it's not going to happen. True, this is a really, really aggressive push, but it's an expectation that we want. It's an expectation that we're going to strive for. It is a goal that our principals in their school improvement plans, they've got to have goals in the school improvement plans and with their schools to push towards that, to help this goal come true. It's not going to make or break the school district, but we've got to push towards it. We don't need to settle at mediocre. We've got to push. So that's our first measure. Then when we go to the next one, when we're looking at increasing our ELA and our math by the 4 percentage points, here's where we're at. In ELA and math, we're at 54 and at 53. We're going to have test data really soon, probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. We hope to have it very soon. It's amazing when it becomes statute and there's a date in there, it happens. So we're going to have that data out there. So we're looking at increasing. Can we do it? We can get these scores up when it becomes a focus, and we are all striving. Everything that is occurring in our district right now, when you're talking about lead principals, when you're talking about the focus of our PD&L specialists, when you're talking about revising everything around the strategic plan, you're all focused on students, you're focused on a vision, and that vision is our schools. And that's how we get there.
Mrs. LaRiviere.
There's just something that really goes through me, this aha, as I'm looking at the chart again. When you look at the year 2012, that's when FCAT 2 was first implemented.
Correct.
And I compare when we first started FCAT, the first few years, you see where we were lower there, and then the score, our percentages increased. Then again, FSA was implemented in 2015. We go back through a drop again. And every time there's a change in assessment and improvements and tweaks in assessments as time goes on, we're going to see that. So we've got a problem of not only changes in, we see drops with those changes of assessment, but we also see those drops when there's changes in how they're going to determine the measurements.
What we need to focus on is good quality instruction in the classroom, and we need to just let the assessments happen that the state has out there, but we're looking at quality instruction.
No, and I totally get that, and I know that's the key priority. That's the driving force. But it was just this aha
Sure.
as I looked at it and figured out the years to kind of see where.
And one of the things that Mrs. Ralph is looking at right now is, as we transition to the new year, is moving away from some of the, the testing that and the, checkpoints and all that to something a lot more reasonable, so we can spend a lot more time on instruction and learning and a lot less time, doing the doing the testing and so forth. So I think, at the later point, she'll bring that to you as well, but that's something that she and her team have been working on that I think will also, I don't want to give people the impression that we're setting these goals and we're going to focus on teaching to the test. We believe that if we focus on instruction and learning,
Exactly.
that is going to, the achievement on this stuff is going to occur naturally as a result of better instruction and better learning, more learning.
Preparing for tests does not help them take the test. Teaching
Mrs.
does.
Morgan.
To add, my sense is that one of the reasons we've struggled so hard the last 4 or 5 years is that a lot of stuff was dropped in place without support in the schools. And so it's not necessarily about the materials chosen, it's about the fact that people didn't have enough time to become familiar with the materials. And that's when you end up teaching to the test, because you're scrambling. If you have a very fundamental sense of what it is you're trying to achieve, then you're no longer teaching to the test. So I'm excited by this.
And just to piggyback on what you just said, Soretta and her team met with me this morning about their organizational structure and how she's talking about redesigning her division. And I think when I bring that to you, you'll be very pleased to see how it is structured to provide more support at the school level.
Great.
On the next slide, I think you are oftentimes interested in how Lee County is performing against other districts our size. So we wanted to I think we have shown you this slide before, but we wanted to bring this back to you again to show you where we fall with the other big districts in ELA and math. And in the notes, you would see that we have 4 districts that are above us in ELA, 4 below us, and 1 that's equal, and 3 that are above us in math, and 5 that are below us, and 1 that's equal. So what we want to be is have them all below us.
Exactly.
So hopefully when we're doing this next year, that's where we'll be. Some more district goals that we want to look at as draft goals would be, now keep in mind, those were our state goals. When we're looking at where we are in the rankings and with the FSA. The other goals that we want to look at possibly are district things that we can monitor and look at here at the district level. So with these are all things within the district, and these are graduation rates. The first one is to increase the district high school four-year graduation rate, excluding the charters, by 5 percentage points over 5 years. Meet or exceed the state four-year graduation rate, including charter schools, yearly. Increase the 5-year cohort graduation rate, excluding charters, by 5 percentage points over 5 years. And close the graduation rate among student subgroups in 5 years. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
Now, when we look at those different levels, we're very specific as to why we want to look at them broken down that way. And there are several charts that we'll get to in talking about them. But the state looks at the 4-year cohort. That's what the state looks at. And that's what we want to look at also. But we want to look at it with charters and without charters. While they're all still our Lee County students, we want to look at it both ways. We also want to look at the 5-year, because some students, it might take them just a little bit longer. And we want to make sure that we are including those students and we're providing them that quality education, and we're improving on trying to ensure that that graduation is there, and we're monitoring that it's continuing to improve every year. Now, the state does not monitor that. The data is not there, so we're going to have to dig for that data, and we'll be able to provide that trend data for you. Another thing.
I'm sorry, because we believe there's literally multiple paths to being successful, and for a group of students, that would be a 4-year graduation. So that's again what the state tracks. But there's another group of students that 5 years is a better way. There's another group of students that GED is also a path to success. So, and also, again, as she said, the different subgroups, because one of the things that you have to be very careful of is if you implement any strategy that it certainly you don't leave out any of the particular subgroups that we find. So we want to monitor that as well moving forward, so we make sure that I think that will help us in the whole closing the achievement gap at the local level that we haven't really focused on.
Let's go into the next slide. When we also look at the next slide, and I want to get to some other slides to show you, when we increase the percentage of students completing the GED program and reduce the, let's stop right there after that one. We spent a lot of time this morning talking about that particular part with the GED program. And Richard, help me here if I get off track, but one of the things that we're finding out is that even within our district, we have students in our student welfare and attendance when students might drop out of school. A W-26.
Yes, I believe when they leave our regular schools and they say, I'm going to go to adult ed to get my GED, it's W-26.
And we want to make sure that we are communicating within those two departments, that we are making sure that we're monitoring that we don't lose those students within that transition, because sometimes when they drop out, we're not catching them as quick. And we found out today the students have to now give permission for us to be able to see whether they passed their GED. There's a form, but they literally have to sign the form that says whether we have permission to see whether they passed the GED. We offer the service and we can provide support in helping them, but we want to ensure that we're going to set up some kind of tracking system where we're communicating this child has chosen to drop out, they need to get their GED. We want to make sure that there's no lapse in the time from the time they choose to leave the school to they're getting some service through adult ed, because they're still our students, and we want to ensure that they have the support that they need, that they can go out and they can have a career and they are going to be successful. So while that may not help us with our graduation rate, that is us being responsible in ensuring that those students are going to be successful in Lee County. So that, I think, is another thing that's very, very important with us. The next step that we talked about is to reduce the third grade retention rate by 15% yearly. That's a huge number, but we need to make sure that we're monitoring those students, and we do that by starting and tracking those students at kindergarten and pre-K to make sure that we're meeting their needs with MTSS and differentiated instruction, so that it's not a surprise at third grade that they are suddenly retained. We meet their needs, that we provide those services, and they are successful. We don't need a 5% retention rate at third grade. We need those students on track. We don't need them to be retained. And
well, I don't think I have to tell you, but just in case, and for folks out there that might not know, that look back at the way that we did school business in the 1950s and 60s is the right way to do it. All the data out there on retention is really clear. It just absolutely does not work. It has a negative impact on student achievement. It is a poor strategy, and again, the state's mandatorily requiring us to retain at the third grade. Again, just the frustration has no awareness of what the research says about retention. But we feel that again, a worthy goal, so that we don't get to the place where we're forced to retain these students because we're putting in place the strategies that we need to meet their needs before they get there.
We also put in, maintain the percentage of students who complete the middle school in 3 years at 98%. We want to make sure that all of our students are being successful at all levels and they're transitioning from one level to the next. We may want to add some more goals at elementary and middle school, but this was a goal that was already in for middle school, and we kept it in for middle school. We also included some slides for your information for graduation rates for district schools. The first one is showing our students without the charters included, to show you where we would want to be for 15-16. This shows you for 14-15, we're at 84.4. For 15-16, we want to increase that to like 86. So we want to continue that climb. Then the next one is with charters included, and we want to get that above what the state average is. We don't want to be below the state. We don't want to be one of the lowest in the state among the big districts. We want to be the best in the state. The next slide is showing you the district graduation trend data. When you look at this, you can see we're improving. We're closing that gap, but it's got to close more. With the training that I was at last week, the new statute, 1008.345, is now we have to document all of the intervention and support strategies that we are going to use to close those gaps. We have to show what we're doing. We have to document it with our lowest 300. We have to document it with all of our subgroups. We have to show how we're going to not have those gaps. That's how we've got to show that. These are all our students, and it's our responsibility to ensure that they are being successful. And this again is the chart that shows our graduation rate. Richard and I were talking about this yesterday, and we need to make this a focus. This needs to become part again of our DIAP and our school improvement plan. We need to make sure that our students are transitioning from the elementary to the middle to the high, and it becomes a goal for each of our administrators that they're reducing their retention rate. As a result, the graduation rate will improve for each of the areas. It becomes a focus. And then the last two goals that we've added, and these are in.
I'm sorry, let me just say one last thing. If you go back to that other slide, one of the things that you'll see soon, that I've asked Soretta to work on, literally taking this and turning it into SMART goals for each particular area, and then it'll be multi-year, so you'll get to where you want to wind up. Let's say that you want to wind up at 85% or something, then it will plot the way to get there, and then go into the different cohorts or ethnic groups within. We'll have closing the achievement gap goals that will also be aligned with our overall graduation goals.
The last two goals, and Dr. Atkins alluded to this just a minute ago about progress monitoring and possibly bringing forth a recommendation to you. We've had some different progress monitoring tools the second semester of this school year being piloted at various schools, because we wanted feedback from teachers. We wanted to know what works, what didn't work. We wanted their input. We wanted input from the students as to whether they liked it, how long it took them to do those different things. Did the teachers find them successful? What kind of feedback did it produce for parents? Did they find it useful? We have had presentations from vendors. We've had advisory committee members to come in and hear those presentations. So we've had, I think the last meeting has occurred, and we're ready to come forward to Dr. Atkins to give him a recommendation from that committee. But that's totally up to Dr. Atkins and you as a board, whether it becomes a tool that we would even want to consider using. But it would be something that's not like a check or a checkpoint. We've been there, we've done that. That's a resource that's optional, and it's available for the teachers to use. But this would be something that could be used for reading or ELA and math. You give it baseline, end of the year, or mid-year and end of the year, 3 times a year, to show where the student is, what's their growth, and where they are at the end of the year. And it's a way to track the students. But that information, that's to be determined. So that's why these two goals were written as progress monitoring tools, and we'll see where we go with those two.
Well, and low stakes diagnostic in general in terms of what we're looking to get out of that, to provide feedback to the teacher in terms of what they need to do to make adjustments to make sure that that we're meeting standard. And of course, as we go adjusting our standards, that's going to have to adjust as well. The other piece that layers into all of this is hopefully improvement in actually the professional development that we're providing to teachers, so that I think, Mrs. Morgan alluded to this earlier. If we don't know what to do, then we're going to fall back on maybe the old system of checkpoints and district, which is what we've heard a lot of pushback about. And honestly, deservedly so, because there's so much richer techniques that you can use to, and even using testing as a teacher to assess and help your kids learn. Intermittent testing, spaced retrieval, interleaving, which is teaching concepts, giving some a space of time, and then coming back to that concept and interleaving it with other concepts. So you're taking it into a different context. All of these things strengthen those neural pathways so that kids are able to retrieve that information over a longer period of time. We tend to, in American education, we cover that concept, quiz it, test it, move on. And then the kid doesn't develop that deep learning. But there is a better way to do that, and I think that that comes with professional development we can provide. So. It's kind of like I heard it described once. I think I did it for the group, but just to do it here, you think about your memories as like a forest. Memories somewhere in the forest, and if I know where a place is one time and then I don't go back to that place, then I forget it. But if I have to go back to that place in the forest repeatedly, I'm going to wear a pathway there. And so then it becomes easier and easier to retrieve that memory, and the brain works in a very similar fashion. So using that technique to help students strengthen those neural pathways to essential learning is something that I think our teachers would benefit by learning how to do that better.
So those were some of the focus or goals for Focus Area 1 that we have generated for draft. I don't know if you want to talk about possible additions or revisions to those, or if you want us to go on to the report card tool that we're looking at.
Board members? Yes, Mrs. LaRiviere.
Interestingly, last night at our curriculum meeting, Lori Brooks came and did a phenomenal job of talking about our graduation rates. And thank you, Dr. Itzen, for providing some of the data that we looked at. One of the concerns that they saw and was pointed out was the fact that when we were able to get the breakdown by charter school of the graduation rates, and to see that the problems that we're having is with our alternative charter schools. And one of the questions that came to my mind is, what can we do to assist those? Because we're talking less than 10% of the students graduating. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but for some of them had some of the alternative charter schools. We were looking at.
And that's going to be a challenge because, as you know, the mission of some of those schools is to retrieve dropouts. And so they take in students sometimes at a slightly more advanced age who are 19 years old and have 4 credits. So that is their goal, to bring those students back into the system and get them whatever learning and credits they can. So it's a noble endeavor, but it doesn't lend itself to success in terms of graduation rates.
And so that's that's the key component we found. We looked at it, that's what skewed us as a district now that all of those graduation rates have to be considered and made us so low because you look at, we went down from 84.5 basically to an 74.7. And so that really does makes us as a district as a whole look bad, but it's not reflective of the school district of Lee County itself.
I think that's why we want to look at the district with the charters and without the charters, and we really want to focus on what we can do without the charters, because we really need to get that rate as high as possible
Correct.
to be able to offset, because what Dr. Itzen said is correct. Our charter schools, the alternative charter schools serve a purpose because they're helping those students. And while those students may not fit into our regular school and they may not even want to attend our regular school, at least they are coming to the charter school. They are attending and they are getting some education there. So that is a step in the right direction.
One of the things that, Soretta had brought me today that I just want to mention, this isn't necessarily an improvement upon this charter school, traditional school linkage, but we did, a little bit while ago, we did put in place Dr. Schroll, Donna, to help us with our charter schools. The feedback that Dr. McCullers gives us, that is a good use of resources, and again, they shared that. Now, we're not expanding anything there. We just don't feel at this time we have the budget capacity to do that, but at least we're maintaining that in place, and he was giving you some positive feedback about that position, in this recent budget discussions, in terms of the value. So again, I don't think that takes us forward rapidly there. I mean, ultimately, I think we have to have some better integration between our traditional schools and our charter schools. But that, like she said, the focus right now is on our graduation rate and.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Morgan?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the dual enrollment. I think if we're tracking kids who are not graduating, who are taking 5 years to graduate, we also ought to be tracking the kids who are finished in 3 years and are just doing college level work.
Say the second part again?
We ought to be watching tracking the kids who are effectively finished in their junior year and using their senior year for college credit.
Correct.
I think we would agree. We can certainly add that.
Cohort.
That's an important look at that. Any other comments, board members? Do you want to proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The next part, we want to talk about the report card that we are going to create that will be individual for each school. We've been talking about this. This is one of Dr. Atkins' visions that he has, initiatives that he has talked about for each school. And we want to make this, remember, DOE looks at us as just a school grade and each school as a school grade, but each school is more than just a grade, a letter grade. So what we want to look at are those pieces that the community and the parents want to know about the school. We sent a survey out prior to spring breaks. Many people submitted information and feedback to that survey, and this is the information that we plan on compiling. This is a snapshot. It's the beginning of what this will look like, and this will be different for each school. This one is just for Allen Park, so this is just a generic one, but we will have a drop-down box where we'll be able to pick each school. Then you will have the school information, the demographics for the school, and then for each of the boxes there, you will be able to click on the profile of the school, accountability, assessment information, program review, learning environment, finance, delivery targets. There'll be safety information, teacher information, any kind of information that you want about the school, you'll be able to click on that, and then another page will open up. This is a sample page on it for just teachers. This information here shows you just information about teachers for that school. It's talking about, I got to put my little glasses on, the average student to teacher ratio at the school, the number of teachers that are national board certified, the average years of teaching experience, percentage of teachers with emergency or provisional certification. Keep in mind, this will be different for each school. We'll be able to have the school's information compared to what the district is, compared to what the state information is. That is presuming we can get the state information, okay? Because some of these questions, the state may not have the information. Then on the next slide is just some more information that might show up on the report card. This one would be more qualifications about the teacher. The percent of teachers at the school that just have a bachelor's degree, a master's, a rank 1, a specialist degree, a doctorate degree, and then the total number, the total percent of the teachers or the total number of teachers compared to what the district has and then compared to the state information. This will be updated at the district office. It won't be something that will be required, a burden that's put on the schools. We will continue to do this at the district office. And my goal is to have this up and running for the schools. If our test data comes in June, as the state has said, we plan on having this out there for the schools August, when school starts. We may not have all the columns in, but we will have information by schools by August.
Great. Mrs. Dozier?
Well, I heard you, but I don't know if I heard you correctly. Did I hear you say that each school's report card will be different? And, all right, but you're just talking about, for instance, like, for the data on the teachers will be different.
Right.
Those are the components, but they'll all be measured the same,
Yes, ma'am.
correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
All of the schools will have this same information, but what goes in the little boxes will be different.
Okay, all right.
Relative to that school. Their assessment information will be relative to that school. The student information, any information that we include will be relative to that school in particular.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Itzen for the balanced scorecard.
So I think when Mr. Savage came and talked to you this winter, he talked to you about the balanced scorecard and the way that he set it up for his school. And I think we've gotten to the point now where the balanced scorecard is not just going to be the assessment data. We have a wide range of measures. What I'd like to do is take you through the explanation of the assessment part of that, and hopefully you'll remember some of the things that Ken had talked to you about, because it's along the same line. Some of it is based on what he had been doing at his school, and some of it's based on an analysis that we've been doing at the district for quite some time. So when the scores are released, and it'll probably look like this again this year, you get a list of schools and you get a percent of students in each achievement level and the percent of students at level 3 through 5. So for example, if you're looking at this chart, our conclusion most likely is that School C is not doing very well. They have 36% of the students on grade level, and School D is doing much better. But the idea is that there's no context there, right? So what if the first school started with 30% of the students on grade level and increased that to 36, but the second school started with a greater percentage of the students on grade level, but by the end of the year, that percentage was lower. So that's the kind of thing we want to look at in terms of putting these scores in context. So our local attempt at this is going to look at both achievement and learning gains, and we're going to get into more detail on that. But it does require that we limit the analysis to students that have scores in 2 consecutive years, because we do want to look at where the students begin the year. So for example, we would look at our 4th graders because they have state scores at the end of 3rd grade, and then we would look at where they are at the end of 4th grade. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those two areas, achievement and learning gains. I do want to mention that I'm avoiding the word proficient in here. It used to be that we talk about percentage of students at proficiency. The state has changed that fairly recently on us, and they are now calling level 3 satisfactory and level 4 and 5 proficient. My take on it is that they're maybe getting towards a definition of high school graduation as satisfactory and college ready at a higher level of achievement. But that's what they've settled on. So that's what the FSA reports are going to say for parents. Satisfactory for level 3, and 4 and 5 would be considered proficient. At any rate, levels 3 through 5 would be considered on grade level. So this is what it might look like for elementary schools. And so you see at the top, you see reading achievement and math achievement. And for this particular example, you'd have it broken down by 4th grade and 5th grade for elementary schools. And then you see learning gains broken down by the 2 grade levels as well. And then down below we have science. And we can move these things around if it makes more sense to make this look a little different. But those are the areas that we want to cover. And in the achievement area, basically what we will be doing is comparing their actual percent level 3 through 5 with what would be expected. And we're going to talk about how we calculate that. And then looking at the difference between those two. And then with learning gains, we're looking at the comparison of the gain made at the school by achievement level with a district average. And so you have some color coding. So green, of course, would be on the positive side and red on the negative side. And then yellow would be those measures at the school level that would closely align with their expected scores or with the district averages. We'd love to have state data to compare to, and we're going to try to get a hold of something, especially in the area of learning gains. I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to get it in the format that we need it, but we're going to try. So those would be the areas that would be covered for elementary, and so for middle school, we would add Algebra 1, and we would add a social studies component, which would be based on your civics. And then high school, you have, of course, instead of math, you have 3 different EOCs, and you have U.S. history.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
When you're putting the scores in context and measuring learning gains, I think is really where it's at. But considering our mobility rate, when we're looking at the chart, are we, if we have, like the school that started out at 30% and went to 36, okay, are we talking about the same students? I mean, are we allowing for that, or are we just looking at the total population of the school at the time that we're measuring?
We're looking at students, let me see if I can say this correctly. So whoever takes the test at that school in the spring, we're going back and getting their score from the year before.
Oh, okay, okay. So no matter where
So
they
we
were.
know that when it's about this particular school, we know those students were enrolled and tested at that school in the spring.
Okay, okay. yeah.
Okay, now we can put in place some other things like the state does for school grading, and that's a Survey 2-3 match, so they have to be at the same school in October and February. So that is something that we can do as well to try to ensure that the student was at the school for a certain amount of time.
Right, and then my second question is, when we're looking at the differences, can we assume then that a negative in level 1 and 2, or that, a loss in level 1 or 2 means growth in levels 3 to 5? I mean, is that?
Not in the learning gain section. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically the way we're going to do this, and we have done this in the past, is to work on scale score changes. So a
Okay.
student scores a scale score of 300 in one grade level and 310 in the next, and so they have a positive 10. And so we're looking at the average of those.
Okay. Thank you.
That's better.
I wanted to mention that Dr. Atkins has challenged us to try to define what a highly effective school would look like in this chart, and an effective school, and so on. And I think that we'll need some more discussion around that in terms of, how many measures do you need on the positive side as opposed to the negative side, or in the yellow, and not only within the context of this assessment scorecard, but including those other measures that we just talked about. There are a lot of different things that we plan to put on that school scorecard, so going through each one and saying, well, teacher retention, for example, what would be the level that we would consider to be highly effective for that particular measure, and then what would the combination of measures need to be. So that will be something that we'll be looking at, and will be a challenge.
Yeah, the purpose is what we want to do is create clear expectations of our schools in terms of what we want them to be focused on, to be considered, highly effective, et cetera. So, it's one thing to show the data, and this has already proved invaluable for us this year as we're making decisions around leadership in particular, and also programs selection. But I think moving forward, to provide clarity in terms of expectations, you have to put more definition in terms of what you expect.
Thank you.
So I think one of the questions that's going to come is, well, what is this expected score based on? So at the risk of going too far into the math, I'm going to take you through that so that you can kind of get a feel for what we're going to do there. So, for example, this school, their actual achievement was 36% of the students scoring level 3 through 5, and their expected was only 34%. So the first thing we do is we're looking at the movement or the maintenance of students in level 3 through 5. And we look at the district average for that grade level first. So on this slide, for example, the level 1 students, only 5% of them moved up to level 3 or higher in that particular year. And these are hypothetical numbers, but this distribution is not real far off from some of the things that we see in some of the subjects and grade levels. And so that's the first thing we look at. So for example, 30% of the level 2 students moved up, and 75% of the level 3 students stayed at level 3, and so on. And then we look at how the school actually starts the year. So for example, in this hypothetical school, 40 students out of 100 students in that grade level started at level 1, and 30 students started at level 2, and 28 at level 3, and only a couple at the higher grade levels. And we do see this type of proportion in some of our schools, and so you see what greater challenge it is for a school like this at the end of the year to show a high percentage of students at level 3 and above when the incoming class of students looks like this. And then we look at...
And that is a reality in some of our schools.
Definitely. And so then from that percentage, we can say what would be expected. So if the students at this school performed exactly at the district average, then 5% of 40 students would be 2 students would be expected to move up to level 3 or higher. And 9 students would be 30% of their 30 level 2 students. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the year, we look at the actual numbers, right? So, for example, this school had 7 students, level 1 students at the beginning of the year, move all the way up to level 3 or higher. And so that's 7 out of the 40 level 1 students that they have, but it's much higher than the district performance with level 1 students. So that's the kind of context that Ken Savage was talking about when he was talking about the math teacher that he brought here, and that teacher was moving up 10 or 20% of their level 1 students, and people would say, well, 10% doesn't sound like very much, but when you look at it in the context of the district as a whole, it would be impressive.
And then take that one step further. Once you start to identify those areas where you really have, brilliance in the classroom, then you can use the PD&L specialist and the principal lead to actually try to spread that wealth across the district. What strategies are working in that math teacher's classroom that can be working in other schools across the district?
So for each grade level and subject and each school, we calculate this so that we can look at that difference between the actual and expected. The learning gains, as we've already mentioned, is just based on scale score changes. So we're going to display the number of students starting the year in each achievement level and their average scale score gain compared to the district average, and then the difference between the two. Again, color coding, we haven't decided exactly on where the lines are between the colors. It may be that +or-2 or +or-3 makes more sense for a yellow or around the district average. It'll just depend on what the 15-16 data looks like in each one of these areas. And that is the explanation of the assessment part of the scorecard.
And the reason we're calling it a balanced scorecard is, this is one part of the picture. We want to present again a balanced picture of how that school is performing. So you're looking at certain pieces of assessment data, but we're also looking at other data as well, discipline data, teacher turnover data, things like that. Anyway, just wanted to give that explanation.
Further questions?
Board members, any more questions? No? I guess not. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we move on to public comment, I just want to take 1 minute to introduce to you a special guest we have here today, Maya Garcia from Florida Southwestern University, and she's here to observe the workings of the board, and we want to welcome her and recognize her. Thank you very much. And now, time for public comment. Mr. Martin, will you please address the issue of public comment?
School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on this meeting's agenda. The subject of comment is limited to the items on the briefing meeting agenda. The time per speaker is 3 minutes.
Anyone on the right side of the auditorium who would like to speak, please indicate. Anyone on the left side? Ms. Quackenbush, please approach the podium. Thank you.
I have a smart mama, and mama said, when you're in a hole, you should stop digging. And I hear frustration and sincerity from Soretta and all of those and Dr. Adkins about trying to raise the results. And of course, it's shared with the community. But we're tired of seeing the happy face. We're tired of the happy talk. The results that you've shown today are the worst that were on the chart. And we've got to judge our results, not by empty promises. We got to judge them as parents and grandparents with what are our children learning today? Are they speaking full sentences? Are they able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide and read well? And unfortunately, those results aren't good. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We all know that. So why are we doing that? Since the advent of the outcome-based education, Common Core, and those preceding efforts and the increase in testing, our children have done nothing but learn less and less and less. If you pulled out a test from 1912, you can clearly see what kids were learning in 8th grade is almost comparable to college degree these days. We've got to be able to go back to what worked instead of falling victim to going to the latest education fad every 2 minutes. And part of that is using decision-based mechanisms in order to change our programs. So now we're on this latest kick of making sure all the children have computers, no more books, and we're spending $1 bazillion on it that we might be better spending on teachers, on increasing the wages and increasing the quality of our teachers. And yet all these children are getting computers. And the computers have many problems, including data mining, and of course the expense of the computers. We're wasting millions and millions of dollars on that when we're scraping pennies together to try and put a roof over the kids' heads to learn. Now we're hiring, the Common Core is one of the problems I mentioned, and now we've heard from Dr. Adkins that we don't like Common Core, and I agree with that, because it hasn't shown to be productive for our children. So we want to do something else. Well, we already have past efforts that show positive result of better curriculum in Massachusetts previously, with Dr. Stotsky, with California in their math standards, Indiana's math standards. We know there are better standards to use than Common Core because there were results showing that. But now we've hired a consultant to help us increase these standards, and this person is not only highly expensive, but his whole track record is from Common Core. He created the black belt on Common Core. We have to go back to what works.
Your time's
Thank
up,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you. And now moving right on to board member comments. Mr. Teuber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today I had the opportunity to go to Franklin Park Elementary and participate in their career day, and I want to thank the school for inviting me, and for all the community members that came and brought all their what they do and the trinkets that they have for the children. It was a great event. Dr. Des Morris was there for the school district, showing the students what it is to handle the money, and all the children were very excited about their different career paths, and they all had their outfits on if they wanted to, or badges of what they're going to be when they grow up, and it's just a great program, and it's really exciting to see. Next week will be the opportunity for anybody who has a service vehicle or a service truck to actually go, and kids can see what it is to actually bring your vehicle to work. But it's a great opportunity for our kids at that level to learn of the different career paths and to get some pre-thought as far as what they're doing. So I was honored to be part of that, and I want to thank Franklin Park for doing that for their kids, and it's an awesome school. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Mrs. LaRiviere.
It's been very busy the last couple of weeks. I had the privilege of going to visit Lehigh Elementary on their Leadership Day for Leader in Me. The students literally led the day with music, drama, hosting, sharing work, and showing us how they lead within their own classrooms. Had the privilege yesterday to go visit Orangewood Elementary. Jessica Bullock hosted a Holocaust survivor, parents from the classroom, and other guests. And that morning, they had brought out the tablecloths. It was quite the beautiful, lovely spread. I was not able to attend in the morning, but I was able to drop by in the afternoon and had the pleasure of the students sharing their poetry, sharing their perspective drawings, and see how actively they had become engaged, and to see the integration of various content areas. Schools are still doing their Read Across America Day on whatever day they're able to do so. And so I was able to go to Treeline Elementary on Friday of last week and read to some classes. Also had the pleasure of going back to Three Oaks Middle School and remembering the day when I was there for the same occasion several years ago, when my daughter was one of the presidential scholars at that breakfast. And Miss Morgan and I both were there. It was wonderful to see all of these students. You would be amazed at the number of students that were recognized for this. And GPA, a lot of times you think, oh, well, anybody can have those high GPAs, teachers can change it. But the criteria was they had to have a 4 or a 5 on last year's FSA. And that, for me, that was like whoa, they actually were able to do that. So kudos to those students, and then just did a drop by to San Carlos Park Elementary and did a little more reminiscing, since that's where I started my teaching career. And it was a pleasure spending time with Christy Coons and visiting classrooms and touring the school and just chatting about things. A thrill for me was going to the Law Week luncheon, and Jim Dahmer, who his first year as a teacher was at Challenger Middle, where he still is, and I was the secondary reading coach at that time. And to see the growth of a new teacher and what they are able to accomplish. Attended the FSW high school graduation, and yes, graduation ceremonies are occurring even as we speak, even now, and looking forward to the Buckingham Schools graduation Memorial Day weekend. I did mention about our Curriculum Advisory Committee last night. Laura, you did a phenomenal job as usual. And then one of our members was just, he had this brainstorm. And then he began to share, and we invited Brian Curls to join us. And we realized his brainstorm was on the same wavelength of what Brian Curls is doing with Castle. And so they're going to be doing some collaboration with that. So our committee is getting excited. I'm kind of disappointed that next year, if we follow plan, that I will not serve as the liaison, but they are wanting to move to 2 meetings a month to better facilitate and complete and accomplish some tasks. So it's exciting to see what people are wanting to do and to hear and see people wanting to get more involved. And that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Morgan?
Yes, I sent you all an email. I'm the board nudge. We agreed in our workshop on the 22nd on some board action deliverables, responsible party, and timelines. One was that the board chair would coordinate agendas with Dr. Adkins to include time for board discussion. Based on the comments made at the last meeting, I think that's something that needs to happen. And we also agreed that we were going to establish annual board priorities. We were going to have a meeting and discuss what the priorities were. And that was to be done within the first 2 weeks, done by early April, and that responsibility was with the board chair. And I also recalled that at some point we, as a board, but not in this particular meeting, had talked about revising the superintendent job description. Now that we've got an evaluation, does that evaluation reflect what's actually in the job description? So I'm just throwing these things out there as topics that I would like to discuss and would like to see placed on the schedule at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Dozier?
Yes, thank you. I had the opportunity to attend the law luncheon as well, and I was very honored to be asked to do the invocation and lead the pledge at that meeting, and it was at the 23rd annual luncheon. And I also attended my construction advisory committee, where we talked about LLL again, and we also talked about some of the things that we would be doing for next year, as well as how things will come up through the advisory committee. And let's see, I also attended the community prayer breakfast, where the entire, a collective group of, I think all religions were represented, and it was a very eventful day, and I think that it was something very worthwhile. I also had the opportunity to meet with Miss Stephanie Webb, and I have actually folder that she shared with me, and I had made a comment, and Stephanie heard that I had made this comment, and the comment that I had made was, I don't understand why we don't have more water activities, because we are here in practically the water capital, because our whole state is surrounded by water. And of course, Southwest Florida, we're right here on the water. And I do know that, some schools some districts try to utilize that as a resource, and they have the Edison Sailing School. And the one thing that was so profound that she said to me, she said, Jeannie, she said, we have, currently we have a group from Fort Myers High. We have a few students. But, we'd like to have all the, middle and high schools. You've got to be a certain age before you can actually participate. But she said, if y'all will get them there, if y'all can figure out how to get them there, she said, we'll provide this free. This is something that we do. So I'd like, and I know that, we don't have any funding and all of that, but I would like for us to, in fact, I've got an appointment to go and meet with a couple of people from the county to see if there's some way we can maybe work together on something to utilize this opportunity for our kids, whether it be through like sailing and crew clubs, or after school or whatever. But what a great opportunity for our kids. And she shared with me a particular student that came from one of our schools, that he was a very troubled young man. And so they said, the principal brought him over and said, can y'all help him? Can y'all work with him? I'm afraid, he's going down the wrong path, and if something doesn't happen and something doesn't intervene, then I'm afraid he's going to be one of those that slips through the cracks, and So anyway, he started hanging around there at the sailing center, and this was when he was in middle school. Well, now he's there. He's one of their proficient sailors. He has completely turned himself around, and I do know that sailing teaches discipline. And I'd just like to say that, they're offering a service to us, and maybe we can have some conversations around how to get our kids there.
Okay.
So, and that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I won't be redundant about the places that you all went, that I went to, but I will say, first of all, I'm grateful for the presentations today. Although I missed my continuous systemic improvement meeting last Monday to attend the Learning for Life recognition dinner, I feel better prepared to present and report to that board about the continuous improvement activities and efforts that are being made in this district. I also want to thank the Foundation for the Career Exploration Night and for all of the programs that they offer to our kids that are so valuable. I had an opportunity to attend 2 days with Dr. Atkins, Dr. Bohatch, Mr. Dodig, for school justice partnership training. And it basically is designed to stop the school-to-prison pipeline. It was a technical assistance workshop, and 2 whole days. Thank you, Mrs. Morgan, for taking the time to come in and see what was happening. But we have a responsibility to our kids, and out of that workshop, which focused a lot on kids who are already in the system, came to me some really poignant ideas about how we can use prevention to keep our kids in school. And I'm connecting it with our presentation on the Code of Conduct today. We have a menu of interventions and things to do that can keep kids in school. I was happy for Dr. Atkins' recommendation at our student hearing today, and I think that we are really off to a good start to not only keeping kids in school and out of the juvenile justice system, but to improving their emotional and social health, and also to increasing our academic achievement. So, with the Learning for Life recognition dinner, which recognizes teachers who are teaching character education and features students who are entertaining with character as the base for their acts, and also allows students to read their essays on how character education and their teachers have impacted their lives, which really are very dramatic and moving. They also have, their Explorer posts, like the sheriffs and the fire department explorers, and now are offering Explorer clubs to middle schoolers. So that might be an opportunity for us to partner with them and some of their volunteers with something like the sailing school. So I think that's worth considering. I attended the Nations Association Scholarship Dinner, which was very nice, and 4 very deserving students were awarded scholarships through partnerships with Florida Gulf Coast University, Florida Southwestern, and the Nations Association. And then also the Sunday night was the Lee County Athletic Conference Awards. It was a fun time, and Dr. Atkins did a great job as the keynote speaker, talking about how he was so encouraged by many of the coaches in his life. And that also brought home a point to me about how important our athletics and the arts are in a well-rounded education for our children. And that's all I have. So I'll move on to Mr. Martin.
Nothing to report this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Atkins.
Okay, just a few items. First of all, just want to respond a little bit to Ms. Quackenbush. What we are trying to do in our school district is literally looking at examining our standards from the ground up. That was the decision that we made as an executive committee. And then as we move forward into the month of June, I think you'll start to see us expand on those efforts. In terms of our consultant, Mr. Baird, I think that I understand the concerns, but I will say this. A lot of the national experts in the area of curriculum and standards were a part of Common Core at some form or another, whether they just consulted with districts to help in the implementation of that, or what have you. And but moving forward, I think that many of us have recognized that there are some gaps. There are some significant implementation concerns as it relates to Common Core, and have decided that it would be best to go our own route. And so that's what we are undertaking. It is a huge undertaking to do. It involves this community. It involves parents, grandparents, teachers, administrators, community leaders, and business leaders, because ultimately we serve this community, and our graduates, we want to be able to meet the community need, and we want them to be successful, particularly as it relates to this particular community. We believe that he can help us do that, and he's done work in Gwinnett County, Georgia. They won I think it was 2014 Broad Award, for excellence in urban education. I think that as we go about this route, this development of standards, we could either try to do it on our own. I don't know if we would be successful. I do believe that we need guidance. Is he the person? That remains to be seen. But I think that we've been impressed thus far. I also, Mrs. Quackenbush has mentioned Satsuki, and I think at times Dr. Milgram. We will vet these standards through them. And, you know, Stotsky was responsible for the standards in Massachusetts, which is one of the highest performing states in our nation, continues to be. And so I think we can learn from that state's efforts. But I think there's others as well. You know, California was mentioned. But again, what the success of Georgia is another place that we can certainly turn to. So, and there are standards. They're not his standards or core standards, governor standards. It would be Lee County standards. And so, you know, I believe that as we do this work, we have the opportunity to shape our destiny. So this thought that, well, we're just going to Common Core redo. No, I mean that's not what we're focused on here. And again, like I said, I think we control our own destiny. I just want to talk a little bit about the situation down in Bonita and our property. You know, unfortunately, our contract was terminated at 5 o'clock yesterday. That's because, you know, staff, as a part of our due diligence process, was in communication with DEP, went down and reviewed documents, turned up something that was of concern. We decided to investigate it, asked for an extension, which we verbally received an extension. But this is a large school district. This is a government entity. We have to do things above the book. And so we needed to get that extension in writing. We were unable to do that, and therefore our contract lapsed. In the meantime, we did receive some information today from DEP, which was interesting as it relates to the site, which I will share with you all. But basically, I think they're fairly supportive of the findings as it relates to asbestos. That was done back in April 2010, but all that having been said, it's almost a moot point right now. Now, it doesn't mean moving forward that particular site is necessarily all the way off the table, but we do not have a contract on it right now. So, I'm going to try to remain optimistic. But in the meantime, I also want to assure the board that we have other options, which I want to share some of that with you now. Some of this is just reality, so it's not going to be necessarily pretty, but it's going to be reality. One opportunity is that we also have high growth in the East Zone. We need a high school there as well, and we have property in the East Zone in actually at least 2 locations where we could build there, and then we could also increase the Estero facility. If we do that, we could literally bring 2,600 seats into the East and the South Zone by the 17-18 school year, and or actually over 2,800. I'm rereading this a little closely at a similar price to what we were talking about building at the LLL, or the Imperial Property Site. About $59,000 to build a high school on our existing piece of property in the East Zone, and $13,000 to add. Million, sorry. $59 million. Thank you. $13 million. So a total of $72 million. Thank you. I said I'm trying to be optimistic, right? So construct 2,000 seats at MMM East Zone. That would open 18-19, and then projected South Zone high school growth with 600 seat addition at Estero High School to open 17-18. The one major drawback is at that point you would not have a high school in Bonita, and therefore you would still be busing students to the Estero area. The second is to build a high school LLL on district-owned property on the Three Oaks site. That would give you 2,000 seats on a piece of district-owned property. Again, it's in Estero, opening 18-19, and that would address, the student enrollment growth need in S2 and S3. And you'd have to adjust how Estero sits in there, and it would be primarily S3. The positive for that is that district-owned property, it's a cost savings to us, and does address long-term south zone growth. The drawback is, of course, again, you're in the Estero area. Next would be to build high school LLL on district-owned property on Tower Road. We've been down that road before. Okay, you know how that, I don't even think I have to discuss that, other than to say we know about the DRGR, and we also you have some busing implications because that's located pretty significant distance away from student population center. In addition, you have another option, which is additional portables at Estero High School, South Fort Myers High, and continue the Bonita Springs property search. And what this means is you would have to you would deploy those to take care of your growth, and then be able to find that piece of property and build on it at a later date, which may be push your timeline out a year or two or something like that. Now, just to give you a little bit of some feedback on terms of what growth looks like. In the south zone, and this is just shows you some capacity as they sit right now. 15-16 school year, that is now, current time. Fort Myers, Cypress are at approximately slightly over 100% of their fish utilization, 103% at South, and 108% at Estero. In 16-17, that bumps up to 104%, 105% at Fort Myers, 105% at Cypress, 105% at South, and Estero is 104%. And then if you were adding additions to Estero, you would drop all of those down into the 90s, high 90s though, except for Estero itself, which would drop down to 93, with a zone total of 98% capacity in 17-18 and a 98% capacity in 18-19. In the east zone, and this is if you built in the east zone, you're currently looking right now in the east zone, 16-17, all schools at approximately a 98%, almost 99% capacity, 98.7 across the board. And then 17-18, you're moving that up to about 101 point something percent capacity for each one of those schools. And then you would, once you had that school built, 18-19, it would drop all schools down to 94-95 range, with the exception of high school MMM, which would be at 75.2% capacity for that year, with a total capacity in the east zone of 90.9%. So that gives you an example. Now, there are schools, we look at capacities across the state. There are schools in other high zone areas that, or high growth areas that are well over 100% as well. So we're not the only one in this category. And then the other thing that we have to think about is that these are fish capacities using class size as it relates right now. If and I'm not suggesting stripping away class size, but if you did, those capacity numbers wouldn't look like that at all. So if you were back into 2001 or something like that, we wouldn't have a capacity issue. So that is just some of the grim news. Doesn't mean that we are, we had a contract fall through. Those things happen, and we think that we did. We're acting in the best interest of the district, and to do that, and because we felt that we needed to do our due diligence and ask for more time, because we felt we needed more time, and we just simply weren't able to get that, and we just we felt rather than take a risk, it would be better just to go this route. Okay? Questions?
I just want to say that I really appreciate our staff, because for the last several months, Reggie Snell, Mark Mora, Don Huff, and Mr. Lawrence has come in on it. But they have been working their darndest to try to have this come through. And I just want you to know that I, for one, see everything that you've done, and I do appreciate you for trying your best to provide a situation that would meet the needs of our students and our communities.
Thank you. Mrs. Morgan.
Yeah, and I would like to add that this outcome proves that the process and the policy worked. It had nothing to do with public outcry about this and that. It was essentially, we followed the policy, we followed the process. This is the outcome. It's unfortunate, but I also would compliment staff and Dr. Atkins for laying out a path and following it to the very end. And it's regretful, but I am appreciative of the work, and I celebrate the work that was done by staff, because I think, as I keep saying over and over, they did a great job, and this was the outcome.
Thank you. At the conclusion of this meeting, we'll have a little break, and then we will have the staff longevity awards here in the boardroom at 5 o'clock, followed by a student performance at 5:45, and the board action meeting at 6. Seeing no other business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Okay, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.